Hey, Dana. So happy to have you join us. Really excited to talk about your project. For those of you who don't know, this is Dana Gold. I'll let her tell you more about herself, but she has done a project on her own that we've been honored to be a part of that she calls Broke. And it's a tabletop board game initially, and then she wrote a short little single to describe the importance of Broke. And there's also a digital app you can play on your phone. So without further ado, I'm going to just turn it over to Dana to tell us all about Broke and why you think it's interesting and worth doing.
Yes. Wow. Broke the Game is something that I developed out of frustration, just like a lot of things are created out of frustration. But my whole career and my background is in working with people who are struggling with poverty. So, when I first started out in my career, I was running a soup kitchen and a food pantry, and then we opened a homeless shelter. And in opening the homeless shelter, one of the things that I saw was that I became a very popular Thanksgiving speaker, right? Everybody wants you to come and tell them nice stories so, they can feel good or whatever it is. But I would go around and tell people the stories of real life stories of individuals who are struggling with poverty, and people were moved and they thought they were nice and you're such a good person, and I'd like to volunteer and those kinds of things. But the thing that wasn't happening that was so important to me is that people were not understanding that no matter how hard an individual struggled to stop this cycle, to get out of a shelter, to not have to depend on a soup kitchen or a food pantry, that it was like playing mousetrap. There was always another booby trap waiting around the corner. And so I was invited to teach a class, a week-long institute for adults about poverty and homelessness. And, I thought, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And I was thinking about it, and I just thought, I need them to get it here.
Yeah.
Right? I need them to feel it for real and feel the stories, because stories are compelling, but as an observer. But how does a story feel when you're wearing it, when you're trying it on? So I decided to make a game because one of my least favorite games in the world is Monopoly. And because it
Yeah.
makes me so mad. I'm not a happy player when I'm playing Monopoly. I always lose. And then when I'm winning, I feel like terrible. So, I want to give people free rent, get them out of jail. I'm just not the right person for Monopoly. So I decided to create a game. And so big piece of paper, tracing circles from a toilet paper roll in a big spiral, swiped my kids' Chutes and Ladders movers, the ones with the little striped shirt and the afro and the picky tails and things like that, and put real life situations of people that I knew experiencing poverty, the kinds of situations that they get themselves into, and took this to the class and had them play it. And at the end of the class, I had everyone turn and look at me and go, "This isn't fair. This is wrong." Right? So I thought, well, I've got something here. So I continued to use the game and revise it and work on it. And then when I was really ready to turn it into more of a training tool that is used by multiple organizations with multiple different populations, so from schools to universities, for teachers, for medical students, for people who are in politics, for people, new social workers, conference, all these different milieus. I needed to really get it away from a piece of paper or a computer spiral that looks like a little shell, that is hand colored in, which is what I was doing. I came to you and
Yeah.
at Carnegie Mellon, and I said, "Hey, Drew, I got this game." And as I learned later, so it's kind of like you guys take on one crazy person a month, and I was your crazy person for the month. You were like, sure, I'll talk to you. And then this really wonderful relationship with you began and the Entertainment Technology Center, and these connections that you were able to make with so many different places that enrich the game, that help put it into a box back here so it's available on the Game Crafter where you can buy it. You invited me to do the book, and then helped create the app. And so now it is a tool that's used primarily in universities and in social service organizations for training staff, training board of directors, different kinds of things like that, to help people really understand the real situations that people struggle with when they're in poverty. And it is both enlightening and aggravating and emotionally gripping and cringeworthy, so that you kind of giggle. Like, it has all those elements, and it's also a kind of an isolating experience with a lot of people looking at you, just like the fishbowl that is poverty. You have all the world judging you as the individual, and really it's where the system itself is encapsulating you in something that's really, really, really difficult to get out of. So that's what Broke does. That's why I'm excited about it. I continue to work on it, make it better. We're releasing a 2.0 very soon with updated elements, but also some innovations to help really drive home that feeling of the system and the importance and the opportunity for those of us who aren't in poverty to recognize that if we lift all boats, we all benefit. The system of poverty entraps all of us with debt, with social problems, with high medical costs, with ruined lives and families, generationally. And so trying to drive home the importance of that kind of cooperative aspect of the game as well. So it's a game, but it's really a learning experience.
I remember when we first met too, when you came with the piece of paper going, I've got this thing, and we played. And it's so funny because you said it earlier, but it just definitely felt like it makes it so visceral how unfair it feels, because you just get into it and you're like, you get constrained by the system itself, so it really helps you feel how what's going on right now culturally or systemically in our society is rigged against these people in some ways, not in some ways, in a lot of ways, and rigged in some other ways where some people float above it all, and so I love that feeling of like, oh my God, it wasn't. What's interesting, because you talk about the power of games, is I remember, and you say it right there, and I'm curious to hear you, sort of explain this a little more maybe, is it wasn't fun to play. It was very cathartic and frustrating, and just like, oh, but then you just kind of sit there and go, this is so powerful because of that struggle that you went through, that the game enabled me to feel more deeply than like you coming in and giving a talk and going, let me talk about poverty and the problems we have in our culture,
Exactly. I mean, in the game, there are opportunities to try and outwit, like, I'm going to make a good decision, right? And I'm going to make my own decision. And I know more than this. And so, but sometimes you and I could make the same decision in a game, and I roll the die and you roll the die, and you're lucky and I'm not. Even the best decision doesn't always result in the same circumstance. So there's a lot of the game elements that mimic the unfairness within social structures and the randomness of outcomes. Some people can work as hard as they can and do everything right and still be stuck. So, and, the other part is that we try, it's a character-driven game. So you take on the character. You can't divorce who you are and how you think and what your feelings and morals and beliefs are. and your decision-making process from who you are. But in the game, we give you the opportunity to take on one of 6 different characters. So one individual is an older adult who's living on a fixed income in subsidized housing, right? Whose situation is very different from someone who is farming their land with a small family, which is very different from someone who's experiencing urban poverty and they're unhoused, which is very different from someone who's undocumented and a single parent, right? And that's all very different than the single person who's underwater in their house and living in suburbia, and drastically different than the newly minted college student who just graduated. So all of these people are experiencing poverty, but very differently. And it very different, so they have different places that they start on the board. They're engaging in the system in different ways. And also it reflects the intergenerational nature of poverty, how the more you have been stuck in this situation, which looks at, kind of social structures and racism and identities that we other and often isolate within the inability to be mobile in the economic system. You're just stuck, within a certain kind of caste class. So, the game teaches a lot, but mostly what people say on the other end of it is, I have so much more empathy. Empathy is the real outcome. And that's, from what I understand, because I'm not a social scientist, is that it's a hard thing for people to gain empathy. They may feel sympathy, but empathy is something different. There's this identification. Some of that comes from some of the forced choice decisions in the game where it literally, you feel the constraints of making, competing high stakes decisions with limited resources. And that is based in research, that when you are making decisions in that kind of environment, your cognitive function actually narrows. It drops by close to 14 points, according to research. And when you know that, and then you're experiencing it, even in a simulated environment, you begin to also see how difficult it is to be creative when faced with, I have mold in my apartment. I don't have enough money to move. I'm getting sick. I can't go to work. And my landlord's unresponsive, right? Like those pressures of, I now don't have enough money. I now am sick and have higher medical costs. I'm trapped in this apartment. And okay, you're asking me to be creative?
Yeah, right.
Good luck. Right? So there's those kinds of things that are also involved in the game. So you can see, so the game is the game, but my work has continued to be in the world of struggle, the world of struggle that our system creates for people who are economically distressed. So my whole career has been working with people who are experiencing homelessness, people who are experiencing addiction, people who are experiencing, immigration issues, trauma, mental health. That's still my work. And this helps me in a way that my work, I work to help and create structures and systems that support people who are struggling to overcome barriers. But this game helps me overcome a barrier that is external, that supports the system.
Ooh, right.
So it's so important to me, because until we are able to impact the system that votes for legislation or doesn't get upset about policy changes or the impacts of transportation cuts or the cuts to SNAP benefits, if we don't get upset about those things I'm still going to be over here doing this work forever. And so will everyone like me for generations to come. We're not going to solve the problem. But through this kind of experiential, it's sticky. People really remember it for a long time,
Yeah.
you know?
I was thinking,
I mean, look, you just remembered, you know, how bad it felt.
I'm like, I was thinking, like, context wise, that was 15 years ago, something like that. I mean, I was thinking, like, how long have you been working on, like, Broke as
Oh,
a
a
game?
long time, but 15 years was, yeah, I'm sure 15 years since you and I first met doing this.
Yeah, I do remember, like, whatever character I was playing, and so it was long enough. I'm sure it's changed a lot. I just had the choice where we either went hungry or I stole food because we didn't have money. You know, it was like one of those things. Like, and I had a family, so it wasn't just for me. I was supporting a kid or something. You know, I just remember that thing of like, you're taking this risk, and I just happened to get lucky in the role where I didn't get caught. And we talked about that, you know, like, oh, if you get caught, you're going to, you know, you're going to get arrested. You're, you know, a whole different thing starts happening, you know, and so you
And that's
feel
it,
that
you
sort
know,
of like,
that's, yeah, I mean, like, but that's one of the things too that is in the app version of the game. In the app version of the game, you play on your phone as a single person. You're not playing in a room with other people, you know, looking at you and having that experience as a group. But it's that even more isolating where, you know, you're getting an alert on your phone, or you're getting an email, or you're getting a text message in the game, and you're like, that it's that frozen feeling. Like, I have to make this, just, they're waiting on me right now, you know? And so that is, and there's nothing more personal than your phone. You're always got your face in it, right? So, yeah.
I mean, what do you think, thinking about what you're accomplishing, like you said, your work in general, and then the game is a part of that, do you feel like it's more effective, most effective, or like, does it work most effectively in a facilitated section where you have people together? Like you mentioned that just real quickly there, made me think about it. It's like when you're playing the game, it's people sitting around a table together, so conversation kind of happens. And if you're on the app, you're by yourself. And like, do you feel like there's a, I know you sort of like, are there ways that you sort of also around the game go like, I'm helping train people to run sessions using the game and things like that?
It's really important to have, there is a guide with the game that gives you conversation questions. And because there's so many situations in the game, you can also tailor make it. So if you really want to talk about the medical, our system, our healthcare system, you can winnow into decisions and situations that are focused on healthcare, or family issues with childcare, or, you know, mental health, you know, so you can kind of stack the deck in a direction that you want to go. So you're able to do multi plays with very different kind of situations, which is, I think, really beneficial. And of course, I forgot what your question was because I started talking in a circle.
Well, it was more just like the idea of like with it, you kind of answer with the guide. I was like, do you feel like it's best to have a facilitated session where conversations can happen and somebody's there helping contextualize thing, compared to like, well, I just happened to download this app and I'm playing it. You know, I feel like something's happening there too, because I remember playtesting the app, but it is a little, like you said, is a little bit more isolating.
I think so. And also, when people play games on their phone, they want to win. There's an
Right.
expectation, right? So it's that setup that I'm playing a game and I'm going to win it. So there can be, well, I didn't win that round, I'm going to try it again, you know. So there's that kind of interruptive experience because of
It's like a shorter, it's got a
the way
tighter loop.
the way that apps work. But one of the most interesting places that I've been invited to play this most recently is with MBA students in business ethics classes. And
they need it.
it's been, and they love it. I mean, it's one of the most receptive rooms.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And because we talk about, you know, for instance, some of the research that was done out of the University of Pittsburgh on financial precarity and delivery drivers. One of their pieces of research was that delivery drivers were having lots of accidents. So what does a business want to do? They don't want more accidents, slows down productivity, high cost of repairs, blah, 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 blah. So they tried putting cameras, they tried restricting, they tried, all kinds of things that cost them money, and nothing really resulted in changing the rate of accidents. So what they did is, through the research done by Dr. Carrie Liana at the University of Pittsburgh and her institute, was they gave one group of drivers more money. Guess what happened? That group of drivers had less accidents. Because of that financial precarity, that stress, constricting the cognitive function, resulted in more accidents. So when you're thinking about bottom line costs in a business, maybe if you just increase salaries, you'll solve problems. And so they're all like, this is interesting, right? It's applicable to everything. Social workers who get frustrated because people didn't bring their paperwork. They didn't complete the paperwork. They're not motivated to change. Well, guess what? It's really hard to remember the paperwork. And I lose my mind when I'm in financial stress and trying to complete a form that's asking me a bunch of questions, and I might not have everything with me. I know that happens to me. That's the kind of thing where you want to throw the laptop out the window, right? And so we are looking, why the teachers who get so frustrated with parents who never open the backpack, who don't see the notices about XYZ happening at the school, whose kids don't come prepared. They're just so frustrated with those parents. And they have all those preconceptions. They play the game and they're going, oh boy, I didn't think about it. Right? So it changes their behavior. So we're changing accidents that truck drivers have with money, increased salary. We're changing insight in the educational experience of children stuck in poverty because we're helping teachers gain empathy, right? So you just keep on putting this application of broke into these different environments has significant outcomes.
Yeah. In
real world situations. And all the game is real world situations. That's the other part. None of the situations in broke are made up. They're all real.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like you're saying, you're coming out with 2.0. So I was just thinking, this is just, to me, it's always been inspiring, the work you do in general and what you've sort of helped, sort of manifest through broke as an experience. What do you see as the sort of future? Like, you've got a 2.0 coming out, and you're seeing all these. Do you feel like there's ways you could sort of document and do further? Because I've always found it interesting. It's like the short little book helps you talk about, point to the game in some ways, that there's something about a book that has that's a stamp of approval. Are you doing follow-up studies or follow-up writing or research on like that type of impact as you develop these next sort of stages with broke?
Well, I would like to say
in all of your free time.
Right, in all my free time. But I do think that the book does bring a validity that kind of the academy, right? I am working outside of the academy. I am working outside of the industry. I am working independently over here and happened upon an experience that makes a difference. And I can walk around and say that all I want, but when you really open the door to the academy, to real experience, and I was allowed to have access to the expertise of designers who did the math about how many moves are good for X, Y, and Z, right? That I don't do, right? Or the book where that whole blessing, I guess, that has no, but I don't know what else to call it, but it, it's like, and yes, this is good. And yes,
Right.
we know it has credence and validity. It would never have gotten this far without the ability to have that, conference of evidence,
Yeah, I understand.
informed, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the Academy can bring to something like this. So I think that that's really unusual. The Academy likes itself. And right.
Yeah.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I was married to a professor. I know, so opening the doors of higher learning to real experiences
Mm-hmm.
and giving them a home for teaching in
Mm-hmm.
creative ways is, I have to say, it's invaluable.
Mm. Yeah, it's like you preaching to the choir for me. I totally agree with that too.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Do you have any like last thoughts about Broke or where next steps for you with all that or?
Well, we have a great board of directors. We have some talented students who are continuing to work with me. There's a research project trying to understand the elements of the game and how they contribute to the feelings of empathy and empathy development, which I think is extremely rich. And we're just going to keep on trying to make it more available and just love the opportunity to continue to have new collaborators and people who are interested in contributing, really, with their own insights, with their own experiences, and their skills and talents that they want to bring to changing the world one game at a time.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity again.